Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar tonight. My name is Barbara Grosh, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters in Rochester. And we're happy to welcome you all to this webinar about redistricting. I'll just say a word or two about the League. We are a nonpartisan political organization. We don't endorse any parties or any candidates, nor do we work against any parties or candidates. We try to help people be informed voters. And one of the big issues that we voters are going to be facing is the whole issue of redistricting, hence our topic for tonight. So the first two people I'd like to introduce are former Rochester Mayor William Johnson. Bill Johnson will be a familiar face and name to everyone. And also Mark Assini, former supervisor of the town of Gates and former candidate for Congress, came closer than I ever thought anyone could to beating Louise Slaughter. So these two gentlemen have agreed to be celebrity spokesmen, helping to publicize the importance of redistricting. So you should watch for them. You might see them on a PSA or hear them on Connections or something like that. So let me just throw it to the two of you. I'm really happy you could both be here with us tonight and say whatever you would like to say to those assembled.
Thank you, Barbara, and welcome to all from the Commonwealth of Virginia, where I'm presently. I really want to commend the League of Women Voters for continuing a long-time tradition of informing the constituents of the greater Rochester area of key developments in the governmental arena. And this year is extremely important. Once every 10 years, all of our legislative seats at the state and local level are redistricted based on population shifts. This year, there is an independent redistricting commission that will essentially take up most of that work. They will be holding public hearings all across the state and provide an opportunity for citizens to weigh in. So tonight's session is extremely important because it gives you the insight that you will need to know if you're curious and interested about this process. So I welcome you. I thank you for coming and joining in. But more importantly, I really want to encourage you to be actively engaged in this process as it takes place over the next several months. Now I'll turn it over to my colleague, my former colleague, Mark Assini, who I'm happy to co-partner with on this very important venture.
Thank you, Bill. Mayor Johnson, it was my pleasure to get to know you a bit through this effort and share fellowship together. So thank you very much. I also want to thank the League of Women Voters. Their efforts are so important to educate the public on the new redistricting law, and we're grateful for those efforts. For a century, the League has fought for voting rights and has played an important grassroots role in our nation's democracy. Barb, I want to thank you for inviting me especially, so I appreciate that. The League's redistricting campaign is important, as Bill has touched on. For me, it's about preventing gerrymandering, which simply means instead of you choosing your election districts, political parties end up choosing their voters. And our founders intended that we would have citizen legislators from the communities we live in, so that your elected official understood what the community needs were because they were part of that community and they could effectively represent you. Now, a great example of gerrymandering was the earmuff district from 2003 through 2012. That was where Congresswoman Slaughter represented Rochester and a little strip of apple orchards all throughout Lake Ontario shoreline to Niagara Falls and Buffalo, known as the earmuff district. And instead of representing the community she lived in, she was forced to represent cities that were about an hour and a half apart. It reduces your influence as a citizen, and it reduces the effectiveness of your legislator. There's no question about that. She did a great job, but that's a very challenging thing, and it's wrong. They should not have ever done that. So it's important that we don't allow that to happen again. So thanks to all the citizens on Zoom tonight who took the time to get informed and are going to listen to some good information. And I ask that you participate, please, in this process and make a difference. Let your voice be heard. I know I will. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. And now I'm gonna ask Kathy Kane to come on. So Bill and Mark, you can turn off your cameras if you want. So Kathy's going to be our main presenter tonight. She's got a lot of information to help us all understand what's going to be happening in the next weeks and months with the redistricting process. So Kathy, please take it away. Oh, by the way, I have some announcements I'm supposed to make before we start. We do have closed captioning enabled, I believe. Should be the case. So if anyone needs closed captioning, look on your bottom of your screen for the CC and you can turn that on. We will be recording this and it will be made available on our website very soon, and we'll send out links to it to everyone who had pre-registered. Okay, I think those are all my announcements. Okay, Kathy, so I'm gonna drop off and let you take it away, and then whenever you're through your presentation. So if people want to ask questions, they can put them in the Q&A. And when Kathy gets through her main presentation, we'll take questions. So that'll probably be maybe around 8 o'clock. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Judy and Barbara. My name, as I said, is Kathy Kane. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters Rochester Metro Area Redistricting Committee. And thank you for joining us tonight. So new districts for Assembly and State Senate and congressional seats are being developed in the next few months. This presentation will describe the process and help you to think about how well your community is represented by the districts that we now have, and tell you how you can play a part in improving your districts. And as Barbara said, throughout the presentation, we welcome your questions and then we'll respond to those after the talk. So what is redistricting? Every 10 years, the Census Bureau conducts the bidecennial census enumeration. That's the formal name for the census. This is used to determine the number of people living in the United States and how populations have shifted within the country. The total number of people in the country determines the number of seats that each state has in the US House of Representatives. The census is also used to redistrict state Senate districts and assembly districts. The districts have to be adapted after the census to ensure that each district has an equal number of people, and therefore each person's represented vote counts equally. There are other rules about districts, and we'll discuss those in another slide, but the easiest rule to understand is that every district must have the same number of people. And one aside, the census may also be used to update Monroe County legislative districts and Rochester City districts, and also the Greece Town Council districts. But that's it. Those are different processes than most of what I'm going to talk about tonight. So tonight I'm talking about state and congressional districts. Nope, sorry. So this is a summary of how the New York State population and districts will change following the 2020 census. You may have heard in the news that New York is losing one congressional district. We had 27 congressional districts with approximately 717,000 residents each. We are now in New York State down to 26 congressional districts, and those will have about 775,000 residents. And we lost a district because other states just grew faster than New York did. Oops, sorry. There we go. Our 63 state Senate districts with approximately 310 residents before this most recent census now will have about 320,000 residents each. And the 150 state assembly districts had about 130,000 residents after the 2010 census, and that number is up to 135,000 residents. So all of our districts are going to have a few more people going forward than we have in the past. So why does redistricting matter? It matters because well-designed districts ensure that we all have equal access to elected officials. To clarify what's meant by equal access or fair voting, let's talk about the rules that help to make fair districts. As I mentioned before, every district has to have approximately an equal number of people, and that's required in the Constitution. The Constitution also requires that the districts be compact. And that it simply means that people within a district should live near each other. And the geography of the district shouldn't be widely dispersed. That distance between people within a district is going to depend upon the level of the legislature that the district applies to. Obviously, Senate districts are going to include more land than assembly districts because they have to capture more people. But the shape of the district should still be compact. Each district should also be contiguous, which means that it should be one single connected area of land. A district ideally preserves political subdivisions such as county and town and school districts. It should also preserve communities of interest. And that's something that we're going to talk about a little bit more about why, what communities of interest are and why they are important to be protected. Districts should preserve the core of prior districts. And that means that they cannot be, an existing district can't be simply broken up and disassembled into a new district. And that provides some continuity in the way people organize themselves within a district. And districts should be competitive, meaning there should be a mix of both parties, both Democrats and Republicans. And finally, districts should not be drawn in a way that would dilute the power of certain populations. Excuse me. They also should not be drawn to intentionally favor or disfavor any incumbent or candidate or party. So these rules are complicated, admittedly, sometimes one in conflict of the other, or in competition of the other, but they ensure that districts are not drawn in a way that may dilute the voting power of certain populations. So not only do we have an equal number of people in each district, but we should also have equal access to elected officials in terms of geography or distance and our ability to organize ourselves. So what is gerrymandering? Gerrymandering is creating districts that violate that last rule on the prior slide. Gerrymandering is creating districts to maintain the status quo or to benefit one party or coalition. Two tools of gerrymandering are packing and cracking. This schematic shows a hypothetical community which is equally divided between red dots and blue dots, and it needs to be divided into 4 districts. And this is a competitive looking district. The competitive option creates 4 districts of equal size with about 8 red dots and about 8 blue dots in each district. Now, packing concentrates a group of voters together excessively in one district. When these 16 red voters are packed together in one district, their influence is diminished. They only have influence over this small area instead of having and influence over their whole community. Cracking is another technique. It spreads voters out across many districts so that their influence is also diluted. In this example, there are only 7 blue dots in these districts, which means that they have less influence than they would in a well-balanced district. As you can see from the schematic, one sign of gerrymandering is districts that are not geographically compact, but instead have very skinny shapes or just very oddly shaped. So what's the impact of unfair districts? Legislators are not responsive to communities whose voting power has been undermined. And this is not a criticism of the individual office holders. They may be very honorable people who want to do the right thing, but they have to work for the voters who can reelect them. And they aren't going to care about communities with compromised voting power. And you may find that the legislator just doesn't care about your community. They don't locate an office near you. They may not show up and visit your neighborhood or get to know you. So we talked a little bit about good districts and the consequences of unfair ones. Let's look at some maps of the Rochester area districts that were created by the legislature in 2011, became started using in 2012. This is a high level view of some New York Assembly districts created in 2012. The black line is the border of Rochester. And each color represents a different assembly district. How well do these look like they comply with the constitutional rules? Although District 134, which is this pink area, and 135, which is this green area, cover more land because they're in areas that are not as densely populated, the shape is fairly compact. District 136, which is this purple area, and 138, which is this aqua area, are really not compact. Another problem with districts 136, 137, and 138 is that they're dividing the important existing political subdivision, which is the city of Rochester. This view of the 2012 assembly districts has zoomed in on the northeast corner of Rochester. So this line right here is the border of Rochester. And you can see that there's this tiny, tiny bridge between 2 larger areas. This is only 2 streets wide, connecting Maplewood and this district over here. This suggests that 2 non-contiguous neighborhoods were connected by this tiny bridge, so that this district would, by the letter of the law, be contiguous, but it's really bringing 2 distant neighborhoods together into one district, which isn't a good way to represent them. So these districts, as I said, were drawn under the old process by the New York State Legislature. These are some Rochester area, Senate districts from 2012. I'm sorry, the year is not up there. Senate districts in upstate New York generally cover a pretty wide area because they have to include 320,000 residents instead of about 120,000. And although they are larger, Senate District 54, Senate District 54 and Senate District 62 are fairly compact in shape. Although they're quite large, they're fairly compact in shape. Senate District 59, however, has some protruding areas, which is suggestive that, voters in this district were really more widely dispersed than they should have been, and it made it difficult for them to have access to their elected officials. Now, there may be other reasons for irregular shapes in districts, especially around the margins. There is a need to include roughly the same number of people in each district. And so sometimes areas like this are assigned to a neighboring district in order to achieve an adequate population in the district. And there may be other reasons why there are irregular boundaries. Webster, to look at this map, might look as though it better belongs in District 55, but it could be that this community has more of a connection with towns to the east. And so it may be their preference to be in District 54. So my point is that irregular shapes don't always mean something's been gerrymandered, but it's certainly suggestive. In this view of the 2012 Senate districts, again, we've zoomed in on the northeast area of Senate District 55. And really the point of this slide is that, that many residents of Senate District 55 have pointed out that areas of the city here have been included in a district which extends all the way down to Naples. And that is combining communities into one district that really have very, very different needs and political interests. So these maps show some signs of gerrymandering. And for 50 years, legislators controlled this redistricting process. They drew district lines that often prioritized their interests over fair, competitive elections. The majorities in power, whether Democrat or Republican, dominated the process and used the tool of tools of gerrymandering to minimize or enhance the political power of certain communities. Gerrymandering resulted in upstate New York being underrepresented in the state assembly, and downstate New York was often underrepresented in the state Senate. So, what's happening this time? We've looked at some districts that were created under the old process, and the problems with those districts are why the League of Women Voters and some other voting rights groups worked for a change, a new process. Starting with in 2014, voters adopted a constitutional amendment that had been written and passed by the New York State Legislature. The legislature at the time had a Democrat-controlled assembly and a Republican-controlled Senate. So it was a bipartisan agreement. The amendment created an independent redistricting commission. This commission is comprised of 10 members. 4 are appointed by majority party leaders in the legislature. 4 are appointed by minority party leaders in the legislature, and 2 are independent, 2 members who haven't been enrolled in either party recently. This commission is now charged with drawing new maps and releasing them to the public by September 15th, which is tomorrow. The commission members cannot be legislators, they cannot be party leaders, they cannot be employees of legislators or members of Congress. So there are restrictions to try to recruit people to this commission who are going to be independent. This is the new process under this amendment. Step 1 was actually not required by law, but the commission did hold public hearings to get preliminary input from communities all around the state. They You may have received emails from League of Women Voters. We were nudging you to participate in the Finger Lakes, Western New York hearing that was held August 12th. After holding those public hearings, the commission is, as we speak, analyzing the census data and drafting new maps using the census data and input from the public. They're mandated to make those maps available tomorrow, and they're mandated to make them available in a way that's accessible to all of us, probably on their website. After they introduce those maps, they will have another round of public hearings for comments on the maps. And this right here is our opportunity to provide input on how well their draft maps work for us, how well they represent us, and offer comments on how they could be improved. After they hold all these hearings across the state, they will edit the maps and send them to the legislature for approval. The legislature will vote to approve or reject the maps. If they are approved by the legislature, then the governor also has to approve or reject the maps. Now, if they're rejected by the legislature or the governor, the commission will edit the maps and send them to the legislature. And send them a second set of maps to the legislature. Again, the legislature either approves or rejects them, and the governor approves or rejects them. If the second set of maps are rejected, then the legislature may amend them. And then eventually they will be, they also have to be approved by the governor. The governor also has to sign them off. Now, one other step in here is that if citizens feel that the final maps in some way violate their voting rights, they may sue and go to the courts to have them changed. The final maps will be used for the next 10 years of elections starting in 2022. The rules for the commission to vote on the draft of maps, so these are rules for internal to the commission, are complicated, but they're designed to make sure that minority members of that commission do have a voice in the approval of those maps. The voting rules in the legislature are also spelled out in the amendment. And I'm not going to go over them in detail here, but again, the point is that they are supposed to protect the influence of the minority party in adopting those maps. So I know, as I said in the process, if the legislature rejects the maps twice, they will have an opportunity to amend them. And the emphasis is on the word amend. They're not allowed to completely start over. They can change up to 2% of any district's population, but they can't completely overhaul the maps completely. They also, the legislation is a little ambiguous about how strictly the rules and the standards in the state constitution, these are the rules and standards that the independent commission has to follow, how strictly the legislature has to comply with those. But because it is in the amendment, if those rules were violated, there would likely be some litigation over that. So there is some limitations here on how much the legislature can alter the maps. This is a timeline of the steps in this new process. The commission held those public hearings in July and August to collect the preliminary input. August 15th, the census population counts were released, and the IRC began drafting their first draft of maps. As I said, that first draft is due tomorrow, and they have said that they will deliver it by tomorrow. And they should also make the maps readily accessible to us. Beginning, assuming the maps get released tomorrow, beginning on October 15th, the commission has to hold 12 hearings around the state. And these hearings are mandated by the law to obtain public input about their draft maps. So assuming the maps are released September 15th, the earliest possible date those hearings to begin would be October 15th. And so this is the time when we will have an opportunity to testify about the draft maps and give the commission some feedback on how well we think those new districts that they propose, how well they would represent us. Throughout October, November, December, they will hold the hearings, follow, and then revise the first draft of maps. The IRC has a deadline of January 1st to submit their first plan to the legislature. And if the plan is rejected by the legislature, the commission will submit a second proposal sometime in February. And I should note that there are some constitutional amendments on the ballot in November, which would change some of this timing. We're going to talk about those in another forum in October. But so some of this timeline might change the next time around. So how can I voice my opinion on the draft maps? In an effort to have a transparent process, the Independent Commission has set up a website. It's even an easy website to remember. Excuse me. This website has links to their meetings, which are all held in public. So far, the meetings have all been held virtually because of the pandemic. I think their meeting tomorrow is planned to be in person in New York, but they have had those meetings held virtually, and the website always has an announcement about when the meetings are going to be held. So their meetings are public. They also provide here on their website recordings of the hearings from the preliminary input. So if you're interested in what other people had to say about existing districts or redistricting issues around the state, you can access those. There's one feature here under public comment that when the website was first set up, this was where people were able to submit maps, but there's a later interface under the meetings tab. Now, I'm not going to go through this in great detail because this will probably change, but this just gives you an idea of what the website looks like, what the website looked like to participate in the preliminary hearings. There was a pretty short form that you had to fill out if you wanted to submit testimony without actually attending a meeting. Another pretty short process if you wanted to attend a meeting and testify. The site will change tomorrow. When they release the maps, they have promised that there will be a clear process posted somewhere on this site tomorrow that will tell us all how to participate in the hearings throughout October and November. They also, people have asked a couple times about whether the testimony that some people only submitted written testimony, and that hasn't been posted, but they're going to post that tomorrow. That was written testimony for the preliminary hearings. They plan to post that tomorrow. There's also a link on here that they've provided, which has census data on the old districts, the districts from 2012, which is sort of an easy way to explore. It's the new census data with the old districts if you have an interest in just exploring that. It's pretty easy to navigate. One thing we should tell you, people who testified in the preliminary hearings did have to sign up and create a login, and I imagine you'll have to do that for the next round of hearings. So what is testimony? Well, the answer really depends on who is organizing the hearing and what the purpose of the hearing is. For this commission, the preliminary hearings were for you to tell them about your community as well as how your district lines could be improved. And that's an excerpt right from their website. That's a first step in preparing testimony for any hearing. Learn about the purpose of the hearing. This was a very general statement that was on their, it's on the landing page of their website. When they publish the instructions tomorrow for the next round of hearings, they will probably have some more specific instructions about what they're really looking for in the hearings. Now, the popular image of testimony is a speech in front of a panel, perhaps with questions and answers, but testimony can also be in writing. If you are, sorry, testimony can also be in writing as well as spoken. If you do speak at a hearing, you should still provide, it should always provide a written copy of your testimony for the record. We're going to talk next about how to provide effective testimony. In preparing to testify, the League of Women Voters has found that often, actually for this particular hearing, one of the first things you're going to perhaps want to do is look at your existing district lines so that you can assess how well your existing district is working for you, or just familiarize yourself. This is a website run by the New York Senate, where you can, if you don't know what district you are in now, you type in your address and click on Find My Senator, and it will return a page that looks like this. And it will provide you with a map of your own district so that you can look at that more carefully. This does zoom, you can zoom in on this. It will also provide you with the name of your current assemblyman, as well, senator, as well as this important piece of information, what district you live in now. When you go to testify before the commission, you may want to identify yourself by which district you live in now, so that they understand exactly the relevance of your testimony for that district. The New York Assembly has a similar website. You can type in your name and ask to locate your district. And again, it will present you with a map of your district that you can zoom in on if you want to look at very, very carefully, look in more detail than what you see here. This page, you can't see it in the screenshot, but it also provides the number of the assembly district for your address, so that you can identify yourself that way. There's another way to find maps of district lines, existing district lines, if you'd like to. If you already know the name of your representative, you can go to New York State Senate or New York Assembly, select your legislator by name, and pull down on their page, excuse me, to select our district or maps and offices, and they'll have a similar map there. So League of Women Voters has a lot of experience, excuse me, let me just fill those in. Quite a bit of experience coaching people in how to give good testimony, and quite a bit of experience testifying. And so we have some recommendations based on our experience about how to prepare for testimony, whether it's written or verbal. First, effective testimony starts with introducing yourself, to provide your credentials, tell the commission who you are, provide a critical point, explain briefly what your issue is, explain the personal impact of the issue on you, provide some evidence to support the position, and conclude your testimony with a specific ask. What do you want the testimony, what do you want the commission to do? So let's talk about these in a little more detail. Establishing your credentials. You should at least introduce yourself by name if you're speaking, and if you're providing written testimony, include your name somewhere in the written document. Provide a little bit of background about yourself. so that they understand why you're testifying and that you have some credibility to testify on the issue. Just provide enough personal background to show that you know what you're talking about. If you're the member of an organization, you can also describe, your affiliation with, say, a neighborhood advocacy group, if that helps to, as I said, establish your credentials for what you're speaking on. Resist the temptation to use this opportunity to advertise your neighborhood advocacy group. It's not really the purpose of these hearings to publicize neighborhood groups, but it's definitely important, worth describing that if it helps to establish your credentials as a speaker. Finally, in the written copy of your testimony, you should include your contact information in case they want to follow up with you in some way. Now, part of your credentials before this commission may be identifying your community of interest. And testimony about communities of interest is where public input is extremely important. As we mentioned earlier, the law requires that communities of interest, that the core of communities of interest should be maintained within a district to protect their political power. That term comes from the election law, and it's to protect communities, refers to communities that are not easily defined by existing political boundaries or census data. For example, agricultural regions that have maybe widespread, might extend beyond existing political boundaries like counties, but may have a shared interest in how agriculture is regulated. Areas with high property taxes, another sort of community of interest. Areas with neighborhoods with a source of local pollution might have an interest in managing the pollution, ameliorating it, but the boundaries of that community might not fall within well-established established political boundaries. Communities of interest can also be communities with similar cultures, such as immigrant communities or Latinx and African American communities, or communities with similar values, such as religious communities. Now, when the IRC is using the data, it will be using census data on race and ethnicity and housing to identify groups, subgroups of the population and protect their voting power. But census data doesn't tell the whole story. If your community does not easily fit into the usual racial or ethnic categories, or if it's not well defined by existing boundaries, it'd be especially beneficial to testify about how well the draft election districts represent your community of interest. If you want to submit a map of your community of interest, it's pretty easy to create one in this software. We've looked at a few different options for mapping your community of interest, and this one is by far the easiest to use. They have very simple pull-down menus, opening pages. They give you a quick summary of the legislative rules in a given state for redistricting. So if you do want to draw a map to illustrate the boundaries of your community of interest for the commission, you can certainly do that in representable.org. So all of those slides were all about establishing your credentials and introducing yourself. The second element of good testimony is to make a critical point. And these are the kinds of questions that might help you to write that critical point or develop a short few sentences to describe the critical point. Why are you here? What is your purpose? What's your issue or your concern? Or what is the one thing that you want remembered from your testimony? So those are all questions that may help you to think about and articulate your critical point. Here's a couple of examples of critical points. Doesn't have to be lengthy. It can be a couple of sentences. My neighborhood is 57% people of color and 62% Democrat. I'm here because my neighborhood has been divided into 3 state Senate districts that are mostly Republican suburban voters who are not people of color. It's pretty clear, short, simple, critical point that makes the point of why you're here. We are a farming community and we are in a district which has a majority of urban residents. That's why you're here. The third element of testimony that we recommend you include is some a little bit about the personal impact of the problem that's created by for a poorly drawn district. You know, this breaks my heart because my children's school is not getting a fair share of funding. Or one that I heard on the preliminary hearings was voters like me feel disenfranchised. He was referring to because of the way districts are drawn. You know, we try over and over to meet with our assembly person, but they just don't, they can't just put us off. And again, this is not meant to be a criticism of the individuals, but something that's happening because of the way the district is drawn. Fourth element of good testimony is to provide some evidence to back up your point. Data and facts and maps are probably what most people think of when they think of evidence. And there is just an abundance of local sources of data and also maps. One of the resources on our website, we'll give you a link to this after the presentation, is the Census Bureau's demographic data map viewer, it's called. And we'll provide, there's a link for that, as I said, on our website. It allows you to either very easily view census data at a high level, like on the state or county, but it also allows you to type in your address and look at the census data. Now, this is the census data available for redistricting, but see that census data in your own neighborhood down to right down to the block level. Some other good local resources are that the city of Rochester has a data portal. The Monroe County has a data portal. And there's also an organization called Rock Health Data, which is mostly health data, but that might be useful to help you make your point. Now, evidence can also be, doesn't have to be data or facts. It can also be anecdotes, personal observations about what does or doesn't happen, and connecting that to how that's a problem, why that is a problem generated by the way your district is drawn. Or I should say oops, there we go. Another possible evidence is just the logical consequences, because you know your community, you understand how things work, you understand the logical consequences of what happens or doesn't happen, what gets delivered or doesn't get delivered because of the way your district is drawn. So that can be evidence too. It doesn't have to be data or maps. So the final element of good testimony is to ask, what do you want the commission to do? And if possible, it's most effective if you can provide something specific. You know, make my district more competitive. My district has always been the same party forever. I want it to be more competitive. That could be your ask. Or make my district more compact so it's not so difficult for my senator to visit my town. Now, just as important could be providing positive feedback about the draft maps. If you like your new district, I think it's just as important to let the commission know that you like it. It's an improvement perhaps over what you've had in the past. So these are, just to quickly review, these are the 5 elements of good testimony. Just a quick review: introduce yourself, provide a critical point, whoops, sorry. Talk about the personal impact of the problem, provide some evidence, and close your testimony with a specific ask, what you would like the commission to do. You can certainly write all that out if you want to, freehand in bullets or paragraphs, whatever works, however you feel comfortable writing. If you're not comfortable writing that way, we have a handy guide to testimony. There's a link for this on our website, which is a form you fill in, print it out, fill it in, and you can send that in or use it as the written document to accompany your spoken testimony. So it's pretty simple to fill in, and it can provide a good guidance. And this is just there's a picture of the site where that's located, and we'll be sending that out to people later. Best practices for testimony. Use simple, clear language. Try to arrange it in the order of the 5 essentials. Use our templates to guide your writing if you're not comfortable writing freehand. Keep it to about 1 page. I believe they got hundreds of testimony in preliminary hearings, and 1 page is about the limit to what they can read. And know your facts. And if you can't find facts to back up, facts in the traditional sense to back up your story, then at least provide anecdotes. We also have some tips for live testimony. Again, keep it brief and to the point, especially your background. Practice and time yourself. You'll probably have 3 minutes. It's probably a good idea to be prepared for a shorter time in case they have so many people testifying that they can only give each person 3 minutes. If you do provide oral testimony, make sure that you provide a written copy of your comments to the commission. That becomes the formal record of what you said. Don't be accusatory, don't be partisan, and it's always a good idea to thank the commissioners at the end. I think we're going to just discuss this very briefly because I see that we're getting close to 8 o'clock. The Monroe County Legislature is also going to be redistricted this year. New districts will be drawn for the Monroe County Legislature. That is regulated by a different process. It's regulated by the Monroe County Charter. Within 6 months of the census being released, the legislature will appoint a commission. So that will help. The latest that could happen would be February. The commission includes the commissioners of the Board of Elections and the president of the legislature and 1 member appointed from each party. And then they will propose some changes. They are supposed to hold some public hearings, and then the new boundaries will be enacted. If there is a public request, there might be a referendum if there's an adequate number of signatures to ask for a referendum on the new districts. So what now? Watch for that news that the first draft of maps will be released tomorrow. And when they are released, you might want to go to the IRC website and take a look at them and think about how well they represent you and your community, and whether that's good or bad. Either way, positive feedback is just as welcome as negative feedback. And we will try to help you participate. We're running a public awareness campaign. As you heard, our spokespeople are former Mayor Bill Johnson and Supervisor Assini. We'll be also be sending you, information on when the new IRC website is put up tomorrow. We plan to send people some information on accessing the maps and on any kind of details and tips that we can help you with on preparing to testify. And we'll also be sending you some information about when the hearing for Rochester is scheduled. These are some resources. This is the page that has most of the resources I was talking about earlier, the easy guide to testimony, and also a link to that census page that I was telling you about, where you can pretty easily browse the census data for your own neighborhood. And the League of Women Voters of New York State also has many resources. They have some resources like a video on communities of interest and defining those, and just a wealth of information on the New York State League of Women Voters website. Our next forum will be on Tuesday, October 12th. And it will go into all 5 New York State constitutional amendments that are going to appear on the ballot as proposals in this year's general election ballot in November. There will be 5 constitutional amendments. Among those is one that does deal with redistricting. Ballot proposal 1 is a constitutional amendment amending the apportionment and redistricting process. It would change some aspects of this process that we're having this year. It would affect the selection of the commission's executive directors, who are important, very important actors in making sure that the commission follows its mandate. It may affect the timelines, and it may affect the commission voting rules and the legislative voting rules. So it's worth bearing in mind that this new amendment, this time around, this amendment that's going to appear on the November ballot, was written and passed by a legislature in which both the Assembly and the Senate are controlled by one party. Other portions of the amendment have no impact on the makeup or the rules governing the commission. So I think I'd like to open up to questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Kathy. And I'm going to invite Judy Weinstein and Judy Sternberg to open up their cameras. All of us have been on the redistricting committee that's been working on all of this. So we're here to help Kathy handle questions. So let me see. I guess, am I the one throwing the questions out?
You are.
Okay. So let me see where I want to start. Do we know yet if the hearings have a virtual option? This second set of hearings?
Everything I've heard, certainly the commission's meeting tomorrow, they made sure they would have a virtual option. So I would think that the local hearings would also have that.
Yeah, that's my suspicion.
But if not, if you don't want to go in person, you can always submit written testimony.
That's a good point.
Yes.
Okay, so Kathy, you said that the population downstate's been growing faster than the population upstate. And there's more people total, so each district has to have more people in it than it used to. So that suggests that our districts have to get bigger, right? Because they're gonna need more districts to hold all those people downstate. Have you looked at how much bigger our districts have to get up here?
Not in that way. Yeah, I don't know how much bigger they would have to get in terms of land, you mean, or?
Yeah.
No, sorry, I haven't looked at that. I'm not sure how much larger they're going to have to be. I mean, it may be that if we have, you know, areas of the county, let's say, where population has grown, it may be that perhaps in those areas, it could be a district of similar size to what it is now. I mean, the city population of Rochester has certainly grown some, so.
Right, but if it didn't grow as fast as New York City, then.
That's a very good question. We should look at that. Yeah, it's a good question.
Um, yeah, Judy, go ahead.
I think it has different implications in the different districts, whether it's an assembly district or a Senate district or the congressional district. Probably the biggest change we'll see will be in the congressional districts, and statewide, we're going to have one less congressional district. And the size, the number of people, I believe, in the congressional district is going to go up by about 60,000. I think it's going from 717,000 to about 775,000, something like that. So we'll see some changes there. But the maps are coming out tomorrow, so we won't have,
Yeah, we don't have to
long to
speculate.
wait
Speculate,
to
that's
see
right.
what they're going to see what they're going to look like, and then we can start responding.
Okay. So you said that the people on the IRC can't be current elected officials and lobbyists and so on. So who are they? Who's on that commission?
So I'll take that. So there are the 10 members of the commission, and the breakdown of that, out of the 10 commissioners, 4 of them are lawyers, 2 of them are professors, 2 of them are former legislators, 2 of them are former employees, either of the state or the legislature. And let's see, that's 4, 2, 2, 4, 6, 8. That takes care of all 10. Geographically, about 5 of them are located in the New York City area. 1 is from Long Island. 2 are from Albany. 1 is from the Hudson Valley, and 1 is said to be from Western New York, and that happens to be, he is in Orleans County. I would encourage people to, you can actually see the bios of all of the commissioners and of the, on the website, NYIRC, that's New York Independent Redistricting Commission.gov. There's you can click on the top where it says commissioners. You can also click on the staff and see the co-executive directors.
Okay. So what happens if they, I guess the rules are 7 of the 10 commissioners have to approve the maps before they submit them. So what happens if they don't agree? You can't.
So, okay. So they have until January 1st to see if they can come to some agreement. And if no one plan gets the 7 votes, then they wind up submitting the plan or more than one plan that got the most votes. So if there are 2 plans that each got 5 votes, or 2 plans that each got 4 votes, both of those plans would get submitted. And then the legislature has to take those plans and work from that. They have to, the first round of voting, the legislature does not get to do any amending. It's up or down on what is submitted from the commission. Let me see. And it is also interesting to know, let's see if I can find this information here. Along with what goes to the legislature is not just the maps, but they will be submitting a report on all the hearings. Will go to the legislature. Yes. So
Okay.
that's what happens. And there's also rules about passage of the plans based on whether they had received 7 commission votes or less than that. This all gets very complicated and very much in the weeds, but there's a little higher bar on the percentage of the vote if it was an instance like this where there wasn't one that had received 7 commission votes.
Okay. So can somebody talk about this Rochester City Council districts? Where do they come into all this redistricting?
I'll take that, Barbara. The city council does its own redistricting. It's anticipated that there isn't really much wiggle room in the city council district, so there may be a little reshuffling, but it shouldn't be much.
So there's no population surge in one part of the city relative to the other that should make it necessary to change the lines very much. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I've been told.
Okay.
That,
There's a question here about contiguity. Does contiguous not recognize historic and real geographic boundaries like the Genesee River in the city of Rochester, a neighborhood boundary for more than 150 years in Rochester? Anyone want to jump on that?
I'll just make a comment, not specifically to the area, but generally, there are all these principles that are to be followed, but in actuality, there's a give and take, and there's a lot of subtleties and how this comes about.
And I mean,
some of
some of the criteria she outlined contradict each other, right? So if you made all the districts totally concave, which is they're supposed to be
Compact.
compact, yeah, you could end up with not very competitive districts. So you might, so then you've got safe Republican districts and safe Democratic districts, and there might not be any districts in which there's really a competition. So that's not ideal. So that, yeah, that's the kind of give and take that you get.
right. And certainly in terms of, if you consider the Genesee River a firm boundary, in order to have the right number of people in districts, that would require people on the west side of the river to be put in districts with suburban towns, and people on the east side of the city to be put with suburban towns rather than considering them the city.
Yeah.
So I would think that people might consider the city more important than the river.
Right.
Again, the issue of what districts are you talking about? If you're talking about county districts, which are smaller districts, as opposed to assembly districts or senate districts. So.
All righty. Any more questions or comments? Okay, so there's another question that just came in. So getting back to the local level, we talked about the city council districts probably won't change very much, but let's talk about the county legislature. Can someone describe the process the county uses again? And do we expect that they will stay similar, or might they change a lot more than the city council districts?
In the past, and this is what's called for in the city charter, the legislature puts together a commission that has, I believe it's 5 members. There's the election commissioners, the couple of people from the legislature, and they draw the lines. There isn't, in the past, there certainly has been little public input. The way they're drawn, the commission is generally dominated by the majority party of the legislature, and the lines reflect that.
So you exactly have the situation of politicians choosing their voters.
Exactly. You know, as of now, they have not said what they will be doing this year, nor when they will be drawing the lines.
And it looks like it's possible the legislature would tip from, it's been Republican dominated as long as I've lived in Monroe County, and they're hanging on by one seat right now, could flip the other direction. So that could mean that the politicians who will choose their own districts will be from the other party.
It's something that we've been watching and waiting for with the county legislature try to get something in place before this November election. Because
Yeah. So
there will be changes and
So if they could appoint the commission before the end of the year, then they'd be stuck with that commission when they come back in January, no matter who wins in November and takes office. Is that true?
There are no minimum amount of time that they have to do something in. So, nor are they required to hold hearings. So they could pretty much do it quickly if they chose to. An important thing to remember that there is the possibility that a petition be submitted with the number of signatures required by state law, and then the voters would have to approve the redistricting plan.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's defeated by referendum or declared invalid by the courts, they would have to come up with a new set of maps.
And are they bound by the kind of criteria that Kathy described from the state constitution? I don't think they're in the county charter, are they?
No, they are
They have to be
bound
continued.
by the federal constitution and federal laws.
Okay.
And there may be things in state law that would be applying, not the ones specifically for the IRC.
So one of the rules that Kathy mentioned that I had never really focused on before is that the core of each district has to kind of stay the same. And do you think that will apply at the county level? Because I've been looking at the county maps a lot lately, and some of them are like snakes. They're really not at all compact. So do we have this rule that they have to keep the core of the district?
you were asked about the county, but I would apply it elsewhere. Before, when it was talked about the congressional district that Louise Slaughter had at one time that stretched from Rochester over to Buffalo. And when that was changed, that was a big major change. And what it was before Louise Slaughter had that district was different too. So there have been some big upheavals in districts in the past. So
They don't seem like they've been that bound by that rule of keeping the.
So it depends on like maybe how outrageous or recognizably gerrymandered the prior district was.
Yeah, I think that's right.
By the way, we have a news flash. Dr. Carbone, the president of the county legislature, propose the redistricting committee appointment tonight
Oh.
using emergency legislation at the county ledge meeting. The commission will be Dr. Joe Carbone, the president of the legislature, Legislature Steve Brew, Legislature Joshua Baruth, and election commissioners Lisa Nicolay and Jackie Ortiz.
And Josh Bauruth will not be in the next county ledge, right? He's forced out by term limits. So that means they are planning to finish this job all up before the end of the year.
I don't know. I mean,
How?
whether once he's appointed, if he's a holdover.
I think
Good
the-
question.
our league redistricting committee might need to draft a response to this.
Well, he may have that because of his current position.
Yeah. But he's, well,
Don't know.
I mean, it's not like he's the leader of the Democratic caucus or anything.
Well, it's very interesting.
Would-
And particularly the timing.
Yeah. Okay, so now we've got some questions for the debates which are coming up. So let me just put out one more call for questions. We have time for one or two more questions or comments. Oh, yep, there did come in some more.
There's
Oh,
questions 5 and 6.
Okay, what are the chances of re-examining the Rochester City Council districts, and how does this implicate the state districts? I mean, we talked a little bit about the city council districts. I don't think they relate at all to the state district. And we talked about the two sides of the river, so I think we're good. But getting back to the fact that we do have elections coming up next month, right? We have contested elections in 19 of the 29 city, county ledge districts. And the league is organizing debates. We're inviting all the contested elections to have debates. And so this provides fertile ground to debate on the processes that have been used over the last year or two, which have been pretty interesting. We also have contested elections in 16 of the towns plus the city. And we will be working to organize elections in all of our debates for the candidate forums in all of those different jurisdictions. Because that's a lot more contested towns than we used to have. So that's pretty exciting. All right. Any of you panelists want to say anything more before we finish off here?
I
Yeah.
would just like to put a plug in for the next, our next forum on the ballot proposals.
Right.
The ballot in November is going to have 5 ballot proposals on it. That's unprecedented.
Yeah.
Normally, there aren't any. Sometimes there's 1, occasionally there have been 2, but 5 is a
Right.
very
And
large number.
3 of them are voting rights issues.
They're all state constitutional amendments.
Yeah.
And one of them, the first one, is quite complex. There are many different points. It's a total up or down. And it takes a while to read a little bit about it or hear a little bit about it and understand it. And for people who go to vote and haven't looked at this before, honestly, I don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah, and we do have flyers about that and at all of our public voter registration events. We're handing those out and promoting those as what people need to learn right now. So you'll see us at Marketplace Mall and at Eastview Mall in the next few weeks. We've been at various festivals and places with them.
The Board of Elections website really has the proposals on the site. I haven't seen if they've updated that lately.
All right.
I would like to put in a plug for Vote 411, the League of Women Voters voter information website. We published all the local races yesterday, where right now you will see, put in your address, you'll see all the things that will be on your ballot, including the proposals and all offices that are being elected, the names of the candidates. And many of the candidates have already responded to our questions and are providing information. Now that it's actually live, candidates are becoming more interested and are finding their responses.
Getting up there, to-do list there, yes. All right, so Kathy, I think you have a closing slide to put up as people leave.
Mhm.
Um,
There you go.